My beloved brothers and sisters in Christ, there are certain things in life you must walk away from, not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough to say, "This is not for me." Casual disrespect is one of the most dangerous forms of emotional erosion because it creeps in unnoticed. It wears the mask of humor, sarcasm, or just being real, but in truth, it's a slow and subtle violation of dignity. When someone makes a joke at your expense in front of others, and you laugh it off to avoid looking sensitive, you're training yourself to tolerate emotional bruises in the name of peace. It may begin with a seemingly harmless comment about how you look, how you talk, how you dream, but beneath the surface lies a spirit of dishonor that should never be dismissed. Disrespect that is casual isn't accidental, it's strategic. It's the kind of behavior that pushes boundaries little by little to see how far the line can be moved before you finally say something. The more you stay quiet, the more permission you give. The more you give the benefit of the doubt, the more the behavior embeds itself into your daily experience. You were not born to be a doormat for someone else's insecurities. And yet, when disrespect is subtle, it's easy to second guess yourself. You might wonder, am I being too sensitive? Or maybe they didn't mean it like that, but your body knows, your spirit knows, you feel that drop in your energy, that sting in your chest, that shrinking of your voice. Disrespect has a way of making you feel like you have to explain your worth to someone who already decided to overlook it. That is not your job. You don't need to convince anyone to treat you with basic decency. It should be automatic. It should be woven into the fabric of every relationship that claims to value you. Disrespect doesn't only come through words, it comes through tone, timing, dismissal, and neglect. It's when your thoughts are interrupted mid-sentence, your ideas are minimized, or your presence is treated like a background detail. It's when you offer your heart and receive silence in return. These are not small matters. They are messages, and every time you ignore one, you are rewriting your own value to accommodate someone else's dysfunction. There is nothing noble about allowing someone to step on your spirit. You don't become more lovable by accepting less than love. And when disrespect becomes familiar, it becomes acceptable, not because it's right, but because you've been worn down. People who operate in casual disrespect often count on your kindness. They count on your empathy, your patience, your grace. They know you're the type to forgive quickly, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace even when it costs your power. But the truth is, peace without self-respect is not peace, it's bondage. You weren't created to be agreeable at the expense of your own soul. Every time you silence yourself to keep someone else comfortable, you abandon the part of you that is crying for truth. You were never meant to stay silent when something deep inside says, "This doesn't feel right." That voice is not weakness, it's wisdom. In a world that often praises politeness over authenticity, it takes courage to say, "That's not okay." But courage is not the absence of fear, it's the decision to act in spite of it. It's the ability to stand in your truth even when your voice shakes. It's the strength to walk away from what doesn't honor you, even when it's familiar. And it begins with recognizing that casual disrespect is not harmless. It is the seed of greater harm. When someone consistently chips away at your spirit in the name of fun or just being honest, they're not revealing their humor, they're revealing their character, and what you tolerate today becomes the standard tomorrow. The more you allow, the more you will be expected to endure. Disrespect doesn't need to be loud to be dangerous. It just needs to be repeated. Chronic lying is not just a breach of truth, it's a direct attack on trust, clarity, and emotional security. When someone lies repeatedly, they are not only twisting facts, they are distorting your sense of reality. Each lie creates a crack in the foundation of connection, making it harder to stand firm in certainty, harder to feel safe, harder to feel seen. The lie itself may seem small, even meaningless at times, but its effect is far-reaching. It doesn't just call facts into question, It calls the liar's integrity, loyalty, and intentions into question, and once that uncertainty takes root, everything becomes foggy. You begin to question what's real and what's manipulated. You start doubting your memory, your judgment, and your instincts. A relationship, whether romantic, professional, or familial, cannot survive long. Term on deception. Lying isn't just about hiding the truth, it's about controlling the narrative. It's about choosing ego over honesty. It's about manipulating how others perceive you rather than taking responsibility for your actions. Chronic liars often tell themselves they're protecting someone, sparing feelings, avoiding conflict. But at the heart of every lie is a self-serving intention. It's about comfort, not care, and over time, what they're really protecting is their ability to avoid consequences. When someone lies over and over again, they are saying that your right to know the truth matters less than their convenience. That is not protection, that is betrayal. The most dangerous part of chronic lying is that it doesn't always come with red flags. Sometimes it comes with charm, it comes with smiles, promises, well-worded excuses. It comes with just enough truth to disguise the deception, but the damage builds. Lies, especially habitual ones, don't just shatter trust once. They erode it little by little until the entire relationship becomes one-sided. One person is holding on to love, while the other is holding on to illusion. One person is building faith, the other is building a facade, and you cannot build a life on smoke and mirrors. When someone's words no longer align with their actions, when explanations are always changing, when timelines never quite add up, that's not confusion, that's clarity trying to speak. Every lie spoken teaches you how much your emotions are being calculated. People who lie often become skilled at telling you what you want to hear rather than what you need to know. But love without truth is not love, it's performance. Respect without honesty is not respect, it's manipulation. And over time, you find yourself carrying the weight of someone else's dishonesty like it's your burden to bear. You find yourself excusing behaviors that should have been deal breakers. You find yourself adjusting to discomfort instead of addressing it, and in doing so, you lose trust not just in them, but in yourself, because every lie you uncover forces you to question your own ability to discern, to believe, to choose rightly. What chronic liars fear most is exposure, because the moment the truth comes out, the illusion breaks, and that's why they'll double down, deny, deflect, even blame you for being suspicious. But suspicion isn't paranoia when it's built on patterns. It's not insecurity when it's based on inconsistencies. It's your spirit responding to something that doesn't sit right. Your body always knows before your mind fully understands, and if something feels off, it usually is. Trust is a sacred thing. It's not given, it's earned, and once broken repeatedly, it can't be forced back into place. Lies told over and over again eventually change the nature of a relationship. What was once safe becomes slippery. What was once solid becomes questionable. The warmth turns into a mask, and every conversation becomes a maze. Truth isn't just a principle, it's a path to freedom, and those who choose lies as a way of life are choosing bondage. They're choosing fear over courage, appearance over authenticity, and if someone chooses to keep you in the dark, they're choosing control over connection. Emotional manipulation is one of the most toxic and covert forms of control. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't strike openly, it creeps silently. It hides beneath the mask of love, care, and concern, but underneath lies a strategy to dominate your mind, your emotions, and your sense of self. The danger of emotional manipulation lies in how invisible it can be. It isn't always as clear as abuse or violence. It shows up in subtle ways that confuse you rather than confront you. It can come through guilt trips, silent treatments, twisted words, or emotional outbursts designed to shift blame onto you. It's not just about what is said, it's how it makes you feel afterward. Do you feel small, guilty, anxious, or unsure of yourself after every interaction? That's not love, that's emotional control. Manipulators are skilled at turning your strengths against you. If you're empathetic, they'll call you heartless when you speak up. If you're honest, they'll accuse you of being cruel. If you're loyal, they'll guilt you into staying silent. They operate in a space where truth becomes distorted and emotions become weapons. The more you give, the more they twist it to fit their agenda. They make you question your reality, your feelings, and eventually your worth. Over time, you begin to apologize for things that weren't your fault. You walk on eggshells, trying not to provoke their reactions, and you learn to shrink so they can feel in control. One of the most powerful tools of a manipulator is gaslighting. They will deny your experiences, challenge your memory, and make you feel like your emotions are irrational. When you express how something made you feel, they'll say, "You're too sensitive," or "You're imagining things," or "You always make things about yourself." Slowly, you begin to wonder if maybe you are the problem. That's how emotional manipulators win, not through truth, but through distortion. They rely on your self-doubt to maintain their control. They make you feel guilty for setting boundaries, ashamed for needing space, and selfish for wanting clarity. It's a trap of confusion, where love is offered only when you're compliant and withheld when you're honest. Emotional manipulation is not a sign of deep emotion. It's a sign of immaturity and brokenness. It's rooted in insecurity, fear of loss, and the need to dominate. But the problem is, when you're on the receiving end, it's hard to see it clearly. You want to believe in the good, you want to give grace, you want to be patient, but patience with manipulation becomes permission, and what starts as a small compromise becomes a complete erosion of your emotional health. You start to lose your voice, your confidence slips, you second guess every decision, every sentence, every instinct, and the more confused you are, the more they feel in control. There's a reason emotional manipulation leaves people feeling exhausted. It demands constant emotional labor. You're always trying to read their mood, avoid their triggers, fix their messes, and maintain a false sense of peace. But peace that requires pretending is not peace, it's pressure. And love that only exists when you're pleasing someone is not love, it's dependency. The truth is, no healthy relationship requires you to abandon yourself in order to maintain it. Emotional manipulation wants you to believe that if you just love harder, things will get better. That if you stop complaining, they'll stop hurting you. But no amount of silence or sacrifice will fix someone who refuses to take responsibility for how they treat you. The greatest tragedy of emotional manipulation is that it's often done by people who claim to care for you. That makes it harder to walk away. You keep hoping they'll change, that they'll see the damage they're doing, but change never comes from hope alone. It comes from accountability, from action, from awareness. When someone uses love as leverage to control you, they are not protecting your heart, they are trapping it. And when you spend more time explaining your pain than being understood, you're not in a relationship, you're in a cycle. One-sided effort is one of the most exhausting and emotionally draining experiences a person can endure. It often starts slowly, unnoticed, and disguised as loyalty, commitment, or understanding. You show up, give more, adjust, compromise, and keep extending yourself in the hope that eventually the energy will be matched. But deep down, a quiet ache begins to grow, because love, friendship, and connection were never meant to be carried by one person. Relationships thrive on mutual investment. When only one person is doing all the emotional labor, carrying the weight of communication, resolving conflicts, and maintaining closeness, it becomes a form of silent suffering. And the worst part is, the more effort you put in, the more invisible you begin to feel. When you are the one who always calls first, always apologizes first, always rearranges your plans, you start to feel like you're chasing someone who doesn't want to be caught. You find yourself questioning your own worth, wondering why they don't try, why they don't initiate, why they seem so indifferent. you start making excuses for their lack of effort. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're going through something. Maybe they're just not good at expressing themselves. But deep down, you know that love doesn't hide behind silence. People show up for what matters to them. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be present. Effort doesn't always mean grand gestures. It means showing consistency, care, and consideration. One-sided relationships create emotional imbalance. You begin to lower your expectations, shrink your needs, and silence your voice to maintain peace. You become so used to giving that you forget what it feels like to receive, and when you do finally speak up, the other person might act confused or even offended, as if your desire for balance is somehow unreasonable. But wanting to be loved the way you love is not a crime. Wanting reciprocity is not being needy. There's a difference between being patient with someone and becoming their emotional caretaker. If your presence is taken for granted, if your absence is never noticed, if your feelings are always an afterthought, then what you're giving is not being valued. The tragedy of one-sided effort is that it convinces you to settle for emotional crumbs. You celebrate the bare minimum because you're starving for connection. A reply after days of silence feels like affection. A compliment after a string of criticisms feels like love, but deep down, your soul knows the difference. You can't thrive in a space where you're constantly proving your worth, waiting to be chosen, and trying to earn basic decency. Love should feel like coming home, not like walking on a tightrope hoping not to fall. Effort should never be a one-way street. Relationships are built on mutual understanding, respect, and intentionality. It's not about who gives more, it's about both choosing to give consistently. When that balance is missing, resentment begins to grow. You may not speak it out loud, but you feel it. It shows up in your silence, in your detachment, in your fatigue. The truth is, constantly pouring from an empty cup isn't selfless, it's self-neglect. And there comes a point where your giving is no longer love, it's survival. It's trying to hold something together that's already falling apart. There's nothing wrong with being someone who loves deeply, who gives generously, who shows up without being asked. But that same energy should return to you. You deserve someone who sees your effort and mirrors it, not someone who uses it to coast. You deserve someone who remembers your value in your silence, not just your service. Relationships should be a dance, not a drag. When you're the only one stepping forward eventually, you have to ask yourself if you're in a partnership or just in a performance. Blame shifting is one of the most destructive behaviors in any relationship because it distorts accountability and poisons communication at its core. When someone refuses to take responsibility for their actions and constantly turns every issue back on you, it becomes impossible to find truth, healing, or growth. Instead of listening, they deflect. Instead of owning their part, they accuse. You bring up a concern and somehow the conversation flips until you're the one apologizing for bringing it up in the first place. That's not communication. That's emotional manipulation dressed in defensiveness. It's an environment where the person causing the harm becomes the victim and the person seeking resolution becomes the enemy. Blame shifting is subtle at first. It may sound like, I only did that because you made me, or if you hadn't said this, I wouldn't have done that. Over time, these statements grow into a pattern where the other person never admits fault, never says sorry unless it benefits them, and never takes a moment to reflect. This behavior creates a toxic cycle. You find yourself questioning if your feelings are valid, if you're the difficult one, if you're overreacting, but deep down, you know something's not right. You know that a healthy relationship should make space for accountability, not create fear around speaking up. When someone always shifts blame, it's not just a sign of immaturity, it's a refusal to grow. Growth begins where responsibility is accepted. But if a person sees every conversation as an attack and every correction as a threat, then they're not interested in connection. They're interested in control. They want the freedom to hurt without being held accountable. And when you try to hold them accountable, they gaslight, minimize, or redirect the focus onto your flaws. The goal is never understanding. The goal is self-preservation at your expense. The emotional impact of blame shifting is heavy. It makes you feel like you're never enough, never right, never safe to express yourself. You begin to suppress your needs because every time you voice them, it turns into a fight. You stop asking for honesty because you know it will be flipped on you. You start to take responsibility for things that were never yours to carry just to keep the peace. But peace that comes from silence is not real peace, it's resignation. And you were not created to be someone's emotional punching bag. Blame shifting also destroys trust, not just in the other person, but in yourself. You start to wonder if you really are too sensitive, too needy, too much. But the truth is, being aware of how you're treated is not a weakness. Naming dysfunction is not an attack. And holding people accountable is not unkind. It's necessary. No relationship can thrive without two people who are willing to look inward, reflect honestly, and own their impact. When that willingness is missing from one side, the entire relationship becomes lopsided. One person evolves, the other avoids. One person tries, the other hides behind excuses. A person who cannot admit when they are wrong is dangerous, not because they're evil, but because they are emotionally unavailable. They have chosen ego over empathy, pride over partnership. And if they are more committed to defending themselves than growing with you, then you'll always be fighting to prove your worth instead of being embraced for who you are. True intimacy requires vulnerability. And vulnerability requires safety. But you can't feel safe with someone who turns every mistake into your fault. You can't heal in a space where accountability is replaced with accusations. It's not love if you always have to lose to make them feel right. A consistent lack of support in a relationship is one of the clearest signs that you are being emotionally neglected. Yet it often goes unnoticed until you feel completely alone. Support doesn't just mean being present during major life events. It means showing up in the ordinary, in the quiet, and in the struggle. When someone cares for you, they lean in when life gets heavy. They stand beside you when the pressure rises, and they remind you with their actions that you don't have to carry the weight alone. But when you find yourself celebrating alone, grieving alone, pushing through hardship without a hand to hold or a voice to uplift you, that absence speaks volumes. It says more than silence ever could. It tells you where you stand, and more importantly, where you don't. Lack of support is not just about inaction, it's a form of abandonment. It's watching someone you care about disengage from your pain, ignore your progress, dismiss your dreams, or act indifferent to your needs. You reach out, but there's no response. You speak, but your words fall flat. You cry, but no one notices. That kind of emotional absence creates an invisible wound, one that often hurts more than any argument or confrontation ever could. It leaves you feeling like you have to do life alone, even in the presence of someone who claims to love you. And love, real love, does not stand by quietly when you are struggling to breathe. Support is a two-way street. It's not about grand gestures or dramatic interventions. Sometimes it's a text that says, "I'm proud of you." Sometimes it's listening without interrupting. Sometimes it's asking how you're doing and actually staying to hear the answer. True support sees you not just when it's convenient, not just when it makes them look good, but when you're tired, discouraged, or not your best. A partner, a friend, a family member who truly supports you won't let you fight alone while they sit in the comfort of detachment. They show up, not perfectly, but consistently, because that's what love does. It moves. There's a deep emotional toll that comes from always being the strong one. When you're the one others lean on, the one who uplifts, encourages, and empowers, but no one notices when you're running on empty. Over time, it wears down your soul. You begin to feel invisible, not because you aren't doing enough, but because you've normalized being unsupported. You start telling yourself that this is just how life is, that maybe you're expecting too much, that you should be grateful for what little you receive. But expecting emotional support is not being needy. Wanting someone to show up for you is not being demanding. It's a basic part of human connection. When someone truly values you, they will invest in your well-being. They will ask, "How can I be there for you?" and then follow through. They won't wait for you to break down before offering presents. They won't disappear when things get hard or uncomfortable, because support is not about convenience, it's about commitment. It's not just about being there when it's easy, it's about choosing to be present even when it's hard. And when someone consistently fails to show up, it tells you what place you hold in their life. It tells you that your needs are not a priority, that your growth is not celebrated, that your pain is not their concern. A lack of support often forces people to silence their own needs. You stop expressing your excitement, your sadness, your hopes, and your fears because it feels pointless. And that emotional shutdown is one of the most tragic outcomes of being unsupported. You begin to live on the surface, guarding your heart because no one seems to care enough to hold it. But you were not meant to survive in isolation within a relationship. You were not created to carry the full emotional weight of connection alone. You deserve someone who meets you in the middle, who leans in when life gets loud, and who reminds you, through their presence, through their effort, and through their care, that you are not alone. When you stop tolerating what drains you, you start attracting what builds you. Life is too short, and your spirit too sacred, to waste on behaviors that chip away at your peace, your confidence, and your worth. These 6 behaviors, disrespect, dishonesty, manipulation, one-sided effort, blame shifting, and lack of support, are not flaws to overlook, they are asterisk warnings to act on asterisk. You cannot heal in the same environment that keeps wounding you. You cannot rise while carrying the weight of someone else's immaturity, and you cannot become who you're meant to be while shrinking to make room for someone else's bad behavior. Your boundaries are not barriers, they are bridges to a better life. The moment you decide to no longer explain away pain, excuse toxicity, or sacrifice your dignity just to keep a seat at someone else's table, that's the moment your freedom begins. Choose to protect your peace. Choose to honor your voice. Choose to walk away from what feels heavy and walk boldly toward what feels whole. Because nothing changes until asterisk you decide that you're worth more asterisk. And you are, you always have been.